What is it like to play the same game daily for 5 years? Why would someone do this? What is a game like this like after 5 years of changes? And if this game was continuing and not being shut down, can it be recommended? Hi, I'm O'Rylan, and I have been playing War of the Visions Final Fantasy Brave Exvius since its global release on March 25th, 2020. 1,883 days at the time of this recording. At the end of May 29th, 2025, the global servers will be shutting down. This was announced alongside the celebration of the game's 5-year anniversary, which really destroys any sort of celebration you could have. The Japanese servers remain up and have been continuing under their own schedule, but for how long, I couldn't tell you. I have many thoughts and feelings to reflect on, as I have devoted so much time to a single live service game, and decided to share them in hopes that others will learn something from my personal experience. By the end of this, I hope to answer most of my questions, and possibly a few others. For those unaware, War of the Visions Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is a mobile live service turn-based tactical role-playing game from Square Enix and developer Gumi, who are known for their previous game, The Alchemist Code. War of the Visions takes what Gumi has built and draws further inspiration from Final Fantasy Tactics, which players saw this game as a sort of spiritual successor. I'm going to come back to this point a couple times because yes, on the surface there are plenty of connections, from the job system, bravery and faith mechanics, field and terrain, including height and obstructions on different maps, and charge time mechanics. This also includes a story centered around political intrigue and warfare between nations. As a pitch, War of the Visions sold many in its pre-registration campaign, and possibly received a bump from its launching at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. However, this is a live service, so this includes new story updates, game rebalancing, tweaks, bug fixes, specific abilities being reduced or boosted, and everything that has to do with the infamous monster called Power Creep. I started creating a list of as many things as I could think of that War of the Visions introduced to continue developing the game and raising the bar for interaction. I got about 15 elements deep before I realized how draining of an experience it would be to go through just a fraction of the things I interacted with in order to make the account I have. If there is anything to take away from the list, I used the word upgrade way too much, and started getting into using the term micro upgrade as I started focusing on everything related to upgrading your units. I wanted to think about how many units there are to upgrade over the course of 5 years. My stomach sank a bit when I realized that there were that many, all contributing to the tiny boosts in power and stats so that I could be a little better in fights. And there are units that I know I have barely used. I can confidently say that I use less than 25% of these units frequently, and that is only because of specific limitations surrounding game modes. Even going through my roster, there are a lot of units that I never fully upgraded because there was no need to use them. And also, despite playing for over 5 years, I still do not have enough materials to fully upgrade everyone. You think the daily grind and staying on track with what was released week after week would keep your items stocked, but you would be wrong. I remember a few times where I had to be conscious about where I used my most valuable materials because either 1, they were new at the time, or 2, they were provided so rarely that you didn't want to use them. One example has to connect to the energy system. Most quests and battles require spending energy in order to participate in them, but you can replenish this with different versions of energy pots, from small to extra large. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the extra large pots were only released twice in this game history, and only 10 were handed out each time, for a total of 20. There are also upgrade materials that, as far as I know, never came out, such as the extra large versions of the guild statue materials. I can't recall ever possessing a single one. The iconic Phoenix Down was extraordinarily rare in this game, which I think roughly 10 existed throughout completing quest objectives of nightmare difficulty quests. There is another example of an item never materializing, but for good reason, since it relates to player versus player content. Special periods, called class matches, were available from time to time, and each day you were able to participate in 5 battles against other players in real time. The more you won, the higher your rank. There was always an option to use an item to replenish your participation orbs, but those were never put into the game either, but probably for good reasons to avoid exploitation of that system. It didn't really stop regular duels, since you could replenish them there with resources. So just starting off with those thoughts, I'm going to answer my first question. What is it like to play the same game daily for 5 years? Excruciating. 2 different ends of the spectrum. There is no way for me to explain a game experience that has had 5 years of updates and changes without sounding exhausting. I'm sorry. I am leaving so much out for the sake of some semblance of brevity. There are periods where the daily play is a breeze, focusing on the simple daily task for rewards and saving for the next big thing to come your way. Some days it was a nice game during a break or in the morning before going to work, but even this was annoying as War of the Visions is not truly satisfied with you logging in once. If you want to maximize, you are logging in 3 times a day. For most of its run, this was for the video summons, or watching ads. Watch enough of them to get rewards, 100 to be exact. Advertisements for sketchy and misleading mobile games you can also download, and sometimes you would miss hitting the X button to close off the ad and would open up a web page you don't want and have to close out of it and then get back into the game. And that is only if it'll provide an ad to you, because sometimes it just refuses to until you keep pressing the button for 7 minutes while you read emails or something, and then all of a sudden it remembers that it wants to show you an ad. I am shocked that some of these advertisements are the same or similar to the ones I've been getting for roughly 4 years or so. I didn't think I would get this kind of bait advertisement again, or, this one which has so many schizophrenic rebrandings of its advertisement campaign. War of the Visions even had sketchy partnerships through the use of an offer wall that would give you extra rewards by completing objectives through other mobile games. At one time, it ruined the in-game economy as players received hundreds of thousands of premium currency through it. Anyway, where was I? Right, excruciating. When new updates came along, that is when you found time to hunker down and complete the new content as quickly as you could. So much of it was only there for a limited time. And for a long time, if it was gone, it was gone. Fear of missing out. Mobile games follow a similar trend to massive multiplayer online games where if you were not playing continuously, you were falling behind. This was very apparent in the multiplayer missions. For some quests and events, there were also multiplayer equivalents, encouraging you to team up with other players to complete quests. I always found it to be very surface level and not truly engaging, because the longer you waited during an event period to complete these quests, the less likely someone else is going to be participating, leaving you alone and out of luck. This is still true today with other mobile and live service games, where players will shout into the ether for help on a specific old quest that everybody has completed already. However, after 5 years of developing your account, something else emerges. You start creating powerful enough units that you can simply solo multiplayer content. Simply create a private room with a password where no one will accidentally join you and get in the way. It's a bit depressing. A multiplayer Final Fantasy Tactics game sounds cool on paper, but in practice, especially with the endgame multiplayer missions, which precision from all members is needed in order to be successful, not to mention the specific units and builds you have to stand a chance at all, I consider the prospect a little bit of a write-off. The multiplayer system in War of the Visions is not exclusive to just itself either. There are so many games out there that just hope and pray the community will develop organically into the vision that the developers have. Most of the time, in my experience, that does not truly succeed. War of the Visions is different because, especially in its 3rd year, possibly 2nd if I remember, it did things right. There was a deeper acknowledgement of the community and the creation of tournaments, events, a couple of meet and greets, and they brought in players of the game and people who centered themselves around communicating the developments of the game. It was lovely, especially since in the early days, this all was fan created and organized, and you simply did not know this unless you went looking for it. Clearly, this did not maintain momentum, but I find the guild system also paints another picture. Be a part of a group of 30 players who are able to combat other guilds, sometimes in various special events for prestige and rewards. Cool. Even has a chat feature to communicate with your guild members. I have not had the pleasure to be with the same guild throughout my time with the game. I think being with 4 total. It's understandable. People leave, lose interest in playing, disappear off the face of the earth. But you better be part of the Discord. You're not part of the Discord? That's a requirement if you want to be part of the guild. We're a bit intense, you see, so we talk strategy and share the data of teams we are surrounded by in guild battles so that you can reformat your team every single day with every single guild. We must win. I've been trying to keep the nihilism to a minimum about a mobile game shutting down, but it doesn't matter. Some of these Discords were not communities where I was going to extend my friend circle. They were utilitarian, cold, and for my own personal health, I needed to back away from Discord and find a guild that could still enjoy the game for where they were at, not where they could be. So personally, I would like to thank my guild until the end, Yorha, even if there is only really 3 or 4 of us left. Now, back to the nihilism point. The second question. Why would someone do this? What's the point if it will all go away at a certain point? It's because I'm stupid. There are plenty of reasons, and these reasons sound positive or negative depending on the severity. Here's my 3. 1, comfort. 2, cope. And 3, obligation. There is a comfort to something you can look forward to every single day, regardless of what is going on around you. It can feel safe. It can catch you during inopportune moments, and for the most part, feels familiar. It doesn't change extremely throughout the course of its development. Yes, there will be new additions and things taken away, but in the case of War of the Visions, the core has been relatively the same throughout. This game has existed throughout nearly half of the 2020s, and everything that has involved that. The second reason of cope is a personal one, and sometimes I find it to be the antithesis of comfort. You are not playing the game to feel good. You are playing it to distract from or ignore something. And sometimes that something is serious, whether professional, like a job, or mental health related, which I absolutely did. There were times when I was not okay. One of them, I will say, I was on medical leave. And this was one of the things that I still had with me to cope during times where I felt defeated, dejected, and alone. I'm going to move on. You don't get to nearly 2,000 days of daily play without feeling like you are obligated to do so. War of the Visions is a special case for honoring loyalty to players. As an aside, I am someone who played Nier Reincarnation when it was around, and also played it for the over 1,000 days that it existed. Unfortunately, in the case of the developer, Applebot, Nier Reincarnation was not interested in honoring loyalty, only giving 50 gems for the milestone. Also, unfortunately, that seems to be a starting trend, as that is also true with Ever Crisis Final Fantasy VII. Gumi with War of the Visions saw this more favorably by giving 2,000 Visior for each major milestone, usually every 50 days, which was like getting a free pull towards whatever you wanted that was available. War of the Visions was surprisingly generous, with even the head developer sending gifts after major development milestones. They gave incentives for you to keep playing. And it worked. So what is a game like this like after 5 years of changes. In summary, bloated. Playing the actual game requires so much prep work, unless you are constantly doing it. To keep things manageable, you have your units spread across different rarities, the equipment they use, the espers they can summon, and the vision cards they possess. Do you still have your guess about how many units are available for use in War of the Visions, not including the Japanese service who continue to get new units presently? I do not personally have all of the units, but if your guess is over 280, good job. But good luck focusing on what units would work best for which game modes and challenges based on their combination of primary and subjob classes and their special abilities. Then, cycle through your armory of sharp metal trash to see how you can tinker unit stats just right to overcome enemy stats that you won't know about until you do a few attempts. Are your espers, your summons, outfitted with appropriate stat improvements and defenses for your units? Do your vision cards provide sufficient synergies for all or most of your team based on element or job class? Will there ever be a live service game without power creep? Way too many questions. War of the Visions has attempted to do multiple adjustments and additions to placate changes, making things challenging for long-standing players, but so many of the changes have been to implement systems to provide micro improvements. Chasing percentage changes in the decimals or whole numbers, like an extra 2 to attack, making an attack stat go from 1,376 to 1,378. Every little bit helps, after all. It also gets to the point where the game can no longer truly surprise you, and simply goes through the motions, almost sleepwalking. It will release a new piece of equipment, for example, and how to get it, and that will repeat as many pieces of equipment they're going to put in. If they have a collaboration event, it will include a special story sometimes, a special event, maybe a raid, and repeat for another collaboration. They even did this for units. You know its loops, you know its tricks, and you prepare for them accordingly. For most of the events, I will say that they are not permanently gone. They can be revisited through the use of the archives and spending an appropriate key to unlock them for 24 hours. I was able to get a taste of what it was like to tackle much earlier quests with a current party, which was a bit cathartic to see investment in action. War of the Visions has kept to consistently naming its difficulties throughout its run, with high difficulty, brutal difficulty, and nightmare difficulty. Unfortunately, all but nightmare difficulty really keep their name by the end. The rest became sending in your strongest teams and have them automatically do what they need to do. Brain off. It's kind of like going brain off with the monetization and valuing of items in the shops. Once you have billions in gold, gold is almost meaningless. So you have to focus on how the game treats its premium currency, which in this case is Visior. In short, either they communicate the value of the currency and balance things according to that communication, or don't do that very thing. The fastest message is don't engage and use it for summoning. Ignore that you could just finish off a card or unit if you just had a certain amount of Visior. You learn patience through playing a game like this for this long, at least I hope you do, and know when to jump, which is mostly on limited events. There have been rare times when the value of items for currency has dropped significantly over the game's life, and when that has happened, you take advantage. There was a limited rare upgrade material that you could buy 100 of them for relatively cheap, and I will tell you I never worried about running out of that material until after the game announced it was shutting down. This happened a few times with different materials as well. And with all that said, I'll lastly touch a little bit on the story. I'm not going to discuss what the story is or reviewing its content, but I do want to go into the release schedule of mobile game stories. War of the Visions currently has 3 parts divided into multiple chapters each, and at the point of shutdown, it really felt like the climax of the current part was near. As I was thinking about this, I got into the headspace of how much wasted time there was in order to get to this point, or bloat because of all the characters they introduced through main story chapters, side story chapters and events, and even introducing an alternate history story and spending time on that. The main story was going on for so long that characters were having kids instead of resolving the plot. There was even a B plot involving a powerful weapon that has existed throughout the entirety of the game and was only truly being developed now that I guess the characters were in the right place in order to simply do that plot. And while I am saying all of this, the annoying thing about this is that it is clearly obvious what was going to happen, how the story was going to conclude. The big villain is going to be defeated. It doesn't matter about all the other characters, the minor villains, characters who just won't die and take up space, or that the main plot was submerged in alternate timelines and that we are in the best timeline of all possible timelines in order to solve the problem. Mobile games, unfortunately, have to dangle a story instead of actually telling it, and in my limited experience, most stories do not reach their endings before shutting down, if they have an ending in mind at all. Nier Reincarnation felt like such a special case where it was allowed to finish, because that was the point of it. Another example I have is Dragalia Lost, which also reached a conclusion, although the final chapters felt accelerated because there was no more time left in its development before it shut down. For War of the Visions, if you have experienced enough stories, you just know the conclusion without even seeing it. Which brings us back to the last question. If this game was continuing and not being shut down, can it be recommended? I have to look back on the initial vision of what War of the Visions was trying to be, which is a somewhat spiritual successor to Final Fantasy Tactics. Over the course of 5 years, that initial vision was eroded and fell into the sea due to everything that was introduced to enhance, challenge, and balance gameplay. In short, no. I cannot be a person who says that this is the time to get into the game if you haven't before. This game was the closest match to its vision in its first year. Why? Because I was actually playing it manually, thinking tactically. As time went on, the game became more automated by design. If you are dueling other players, you have no choice to control your units. The story missions are so easy that there is no point to manually controlling your units if the mission only lasts less than 30 seconds. Even class matches, where you can manually control your team against another player, most likely your opponent will be auto mode enabled, so you're not actually fighting them. And when you are grinding materials for all of the different upgrade systems in the game, are you really going to manually control your units for everything? One fantastic addition I will say that the game got is background repeat, allowing a team to go through a quest as many times as your energy or time in the day will allow. Then you can do other things in the game, or simply close it. It will still run regardless. Before that, you had to actually have the game run through each lap until your energy ran out, then replenish, and then keep going. I can only recommend a version of this game that doesn't exist anymore when it was more limited. They even brought in a game mode called Selection Quests and cost limited events so that you would use units you would never use otherwise. There is little tactical thought without constraints and limits, and those modes show that. And one of the limits there should be is ending, stopping. If this game was not shutting down, I don't know when I would have stopped. At the end of the third part of the story? This is a situation where having something stop the cycle for you is a blessing. There are players of this game who will simply say that they enjoyed the ride. And while going back through my ride, there were many signs I ignored where I should have jumped, because the ride was not fun anymore. That obligation took over. There was no thought. I'll take the regret. The regret will tell me I was here. And I just have to deal with that. So this is goodbye to War of the Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Thank you for watching. See you next time, everyone. It has been a while since I've released a video, hasn't it? It turns out having a forced deadline and an energized focus on what I wanted to do is helpful. I hope to bring this to revitalize past projects. Since War of the Visions is shutting down on Thursday, May 29th, I will be live on that day at roughly 9 p.m. Pacific, roughly 3 hours before shutdown, to participate in the final day, going through details that I did not do in this video so that it was not a 3-hour video. You can find the link to the stream in the description of this video. I also stream weekly on Saturdays, with videos available in the live tab on my channel. Come and say hi. I appreciate it if you do. Take care, everyone.